Good morning, everyone. We are Team Echo, and today we're going to be discussing autonomous vehicles or autonomous cars.
The history of driverless cars actually can date back all the way to the early 1400s with Leonardo da Vinci. And he designed a car that was powered by autonomous springs and other mechanical machinery, but that is just a little too far back for us. So we could speed it up a little bit forward to the 1930s and the 1940s at the New York State World Fair, where GM had an exhibit that was purely based upon an autonomous highway program that was set up to cut back on the safety conditions and all the traffic congestion that New York City seems to be experiencing with the rise of cars and the downfall of horses and carriages that are typically being pulled around through that transportation method. Now, any kind of meaningful progress wouldn't really be made for another couple decades. Around the 1960s, with enthusiasts of artificial intelligence, very early enthusiasts, thought of seeing driverless cars as more of an insect, such as a cockroach, how they use all their antennae and their sensors to move around without actually having eyes. So that's how they took that concept and kind of ran with it, to further develop the idea of autonomous driving vehicles. Now, these few senses and processing power, as well as reacting with the appropriate movement and time and ability, would really drive the need for further innovation when it comes to these technologies. Let's see, early pioneers dreamed of a breakthrough technology, but the first one we came to is in the 1980s, the German pioneer Ernest Dickmans, who got a Mercedes van to drive around hundreds of highway miles autonomously, which is a tremendous feat considering the computing power that they had back then. Now, moving forward to today, you could buy yourself a self-driving car known as the Navia, which can only go about 12 miles per hour and is very limited to about a campus range, which is really set up on the company that built it, so it really just gets them from the lunchroom to like the break room and back to their office. But you can think of other history bits and pieces through technologies that seem minor, such as rear view cameras and just having the ability of the car park itself. Now, all these little pieces may seem like little nice conveniences to have on your 2018 SUV, but all of these are now generally becoming the history of autonomous cars, where maybe 10 to 30 years down the line, you can see the whole car not just parking itself, but also driving yourself to and from work, going from home, and just even a lot better Uber driver as well.
Okay.
Given these timeline of breakthrough technologies, how long do you think until autonomous driving vehicles become widespread, such as mass transportation or other driving services like Uber?
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about driverless cars and how they work. Driverless cars have a variety of ways that they can perceive the world, and basically they don't have eyes, but they have their own kind of electrical components that view the world in their own way. Different kinds of parts are radar, LiDAR, just kind of like radar with light, similar to how the cops catch your car when you're speeding. They shoot a little laser at your car and it bounces back and sees how fast you are. It uses that in addition to the other technology on it, such as just regular cameras, like rear view cameras, front view. I think they have a top one that rotates kind of like a Google Street View that lets it know how the world around it is arranged. And in addition to that, it has a big part inside of it, which is a huge processor that has neural networks and machine learning, where it identifies patterns in the data around it, and it tries to feed it to the machine learning algorithms to make sure it's not bumping into stuff or what stuff is exactly. So it might be able to tell the difference between a tree and a person or a stop sign, stuff like that. Obviously, people move and trees don't, so it's a little bit easier to process a tree, but it takes all these sources and compiles a 3D representation. One of these examples is a vehicle on Google's Waymo, which has additional features on top of having those radar, LiDAR, and cameras, which are a rotating roof-mounted LiDAR sensor that monitors a 60-meter range around the car, creates a dynamic 3D map of the car's current environment. A sensor on the left rear wheel monitors sideways movement to detect the car's position relative to the 3D map, so it basically checks if the car is steering off the road or is going to hit a curb or there's a curve in the road. Radar systems in the front and rear to calculate distances to objects, so when it brakes it doesn't bump into the car in front of it. AI software in the car that's connected to Google Street View itself, so it can kind of already have a baseline image to look for. and it has AI that simulates human perceptual and decision-making processes, and kind of like where a human might start braking from, or where they would start driving. This how long until after the green light that they start going forward. And do you think a computer can make a better judgment call during traffic than a human?
Alright, so with driverless vehicles, they like to categorize these different vehicles. With the big boom of driverless vehicles, we kind of have different levels almost of what one can do versus another. So say one can assist the driver while one can completely control everything. So instead of giving them the same name, the same category, we like to split them up to kind of give one, to try and explain a car a little more easily with just giving it a level. So we're going to start with level 0. There are 5 or 6 different levels, 6 if you count level 0. So level 0 is there is no assistance by anything other than just the human driver. The human driver controls everything at all times and is no way assisted by any type of system. Alright? Level 1 is a very little bit of assistance. So say in recent years it's actually become a little bit more popular, almost a standard in some cars. So level 1 actually gives some type of warning or indication when something goes wrong. So say you're drifting lanes, you're getting too close to the car in front of you, someone is getting really close to you in the rear, this will give you kind of like a beep or an indication. Like a lot of you may, when you're backing up, when you get near something, it'll beep at you saying, hey, you're about to hit something. So level 2 is a little more assistance from the car itself or from the technology. Level 2 is it can actually perform actions for you, such as braking or steering. So say you're getting really close to someone, you're getting too close, and then all of a sudden the car will brake for you. If you're drifting lanes, maybe it'll steer for you. It may still beep for you just as well as level 1 did, but this level will actually do some of the things for you. But you're still in full control at all times. Your controls will go beyond that of the car. Alright, so level 3 is where we get into more of today's cars, such as a Tesla. When you hear about cars driving themselves, you're usually talking about category 3. Category 3 cars can do some very certain circumstances completely by themselves, such as parking themselves, parallel parking, which I know a lot of you can appreciate. It can drive on freeways maybe, it can switch lanes. Say if you're like in a lane, you like click the flicker saying you want to switch lanes, it'll do that for you. Or if you even set a path, it's just like on a Tesla, that'll switch lanes for you, it'll take you to your destination, everything like that. But again, the driver has to be able to take full control at any time, and it's only under certain circumstances, not all circumstances. Now to level 4, it's a bit of a bump up from level 3, alright? So it requires less human interaction. There are more circumstances that the car can operate itself. So it can, and just more than parking, and even more than a Tesla can right now, you put in a destination and it goes, and you really don't have to pay attention. Yes, you might be able to get it stuck. If it gets stuck in like a curb or something, you might be able to get it out, but other than that, that's about it. Now, level 5 is where it gets really intense, okay? There is no steering wheel. There's no steering wheel, there's no driver, there's no one that can interact or alter the car's path or anything. The car does all navigation in all circumstances, and the driver is not required to pay attention at all. Alright, it's all up to the car at that point. Alright, so say the level 5 car, the one that without the steering wheel comes out, and you're one of the first people that has a chance to ride in it as a daily driver, your daily car. Would you take that opportunity? Would you feel comfortable and would you feel safe riding in a car that was completely not controlled by you?
Alright, let's move on to the pros of autonomous car. So for many industry, autonomous technology have been incorporated into product for some time of the car industry. However, things only start to the measuring process in the last 30 years since there have been huge research have finally developed product worthy enough to first driverless car. Well, this is very excited. Still a long time before automated vehicle have been seen the road when to complete technologies is say to have ability of estimates how many concerns are not that come to driving is said research finding a social benefit. Autonomous vehicle include crash and increase mobility and increase in fuel economy will likely outweigh disadvantages having driverless car on markets. According in the insurance enthusiasts in highway safety, nearly a third of all crashes have been prevented if the vehicle had been forward collision and lane departure. Warning system have been featured. Autonomous vehicle have been seen extensively. Estimate issue crash do find on the visual block. In addition, block posted false claim 2012 along there were 30,000 facial crash with least die over 23,000 passengers. Adam Awesome kind of block finished by starting the event. The technology worked poorly as per 10,000 facilities. Leave would be listed. Post also report there are circle 10,000 more facial bicycle motorcyclists. So here is a couple list of the pro self-driving car. So in comparison, my bad we have driver might inherit this. We have the wheel computer is actually a deal with the motorist, and 81% of car crash in results of human errors. Human use complicated algorithm to determine approach stop to distance. There is no opportunity for computer distract. This is least cause of accident in United presents. Although this is not clear what extent life would be saved, it is obvious the human give the car come to very high cost term danger. The U.S. Department Transportation actually assign a value is human life. The article from Forbes point out there is also the cost saving a social with the time when computer take over the driving responsibility. Driver can use that time to do another thing, like cast up or reading or chat with a passenger, all without having worry too much about road safety. My discussion question is what is benefit and what the autonomous car going to be the top list we roll in the future.
Today I'm going to be elaborating more about the cons with autonomous cars, as Kai mentioned the pros that are associated with autonomous cars. There's a lot of promise and opportunity associated with self-driving cars. Therefore, there's a lot of questions and concerns. The technology is still being developed and tested, so workarounds for some of the more above mentioned problems might not be created as of yet. So, the system isn't perfect, so that still is what is present as the problem and the situation still arises. Self-driving cars may be a part of the future, but if they're deployed across America's roadways, it could not only be a revolution for drivers, but also traffic patterns around the United States, but also for the transportation industry as a whole. So now I'm going to actually get into some of the biggest cons that are associated with that and questions that normally arise from this. Well, the cost of implementing the new technology could be way out of reach for most Americans. So currently the engineering power and computer requirements for the software and sensors add up to more than $100,000. So financially that is going to create a whole level of monetary situations that are going to arise for that for fellow Americans. The most of the savings in terms of cost, time, and lives is going to come from the people who opt into the service. Commonly, if self-driving cars are not widely adopted, accidents can and will still happen, and you don't really know like who is to blame for a wreck or an accident when it's an autonomous car as opposed to someone actually driving the vehicle behind the wheel. So that's one thing. The very security behind self-driving cars would be a major obstacle especially because the technology would be very high interest to hackers, as pointed out by a specific news article that referenced. And another thing is, in order for a computer to operate a vehicle, a lot of information would have to be stored on the software, so a lot of future advancements in AI is going to be a big scenario that we don't know what we can say about that yet, and where technology is going to be within the next 5 to 10 years, to say the least. Even though there are concerns about the adequate nature of public transportation, self-driving cars could eliminate this, but it would also eliminate jobs for Americans, and as you know, taxi driving service and Uber and Lyft are a big transportation type of services offered in the United States, and that would eliminate many of those jobs that Americans use to earn money on a regular basis. The cars also would not be able to operate in all safety and weather conditions, especially if it's a severe thunderstorm or something like that. We don't know if the technology is going to be adept to handle all those different circumstances. Now that you heard the various cons that I've talked about earlier, I'm going to actually have a question for you. So, who would be liable for an accident involving a driverless vehicle?
So after listening to all the pros and cons of driverless cars, I'm going to elaborate more on the safety. One of the most difficult questions for self-driving car concerns their safety. How can we determine whether the particular self-driving car is safe or not? The most popular answer to this question is on the basis on straightforward application of statistics and leads to the conclusion such that fully autonomous vehicles would have to be driven hundreds of millions of miles and sometimes hundreds of billions of miles to demonstrate their reliability. According to an article, U.S. safety regulators says 94% of crashes can be blamed on human errors, and with the smartphone distracting more drivers, U.S. road that surged 14% from 2014 to 2016. Meanwhile, robots are always alert and focused on the self-driving task, and advance in artificial intelligence can combine with on-road experience to make cars become even safe drivers over time. So after that, there is one more problem with this, which is accidents, which happens often. So robot drivers are strict rules followers. This has caused many human drivers to rear-end slow-moving or stop self-driving cars, which account for most of the accidents. The death in Arizona was the first fatality involving a fully autonomous car. Arizona's government has banned Uber from operating autonomous car on the state's road indefinitely, putting its ambitious plan to offer a robot taxi service to the public by year-end in jeopardy. So I have one discussion question for you guys. Do you guys think is it still safe to get or to drive in the driverless car?